Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Skipton Talks, and in this edition we'll be talking about the differences in the Scottish market and how the Skipton proposition can help people have a smooth process when buying a home in Scotland. And if we're talking about Scotland, I'm delighted to have with me sat on the settee Isha Thomson, who is the BDM for Scotland. We should just say that this was probably a little short webinar, but the information we're giving you is correct at the time of the recording. So Isha, how long have you been covering Scotland as BDM?
Thanks, Derek. So I joined Skipton about 2.5 years ago now as the BDM for Scotland, supporting our Scottish brokers. I've actually been in financial services for about 10 years now, and before I joined Skipton, I worked for TSB in a similar role. So all in all, I've been about 3.5 years in the BDM space.
Okay, so a good time there. Those people watching will know this anyway, that there's quite a bit of difference in buying a home in Scotland, so they'll know that, but what do you see are the fundamental differences?
So many differences. I think the biggest one for me would be the 3Gs. So gazumping is just not a thing in Scotland, and I was actually quite surprised to learn about how often that can arise in the English chain.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I think the home report is probably the biggest difference that we have in the home report, and the onus on that coming to the seller to kind of commission that and have that available for potential buyers.
Yep.
And then tenure types, probably one to call out as well. So obviously we have absolute ownership in Scotland, and I'd liken that to freehold equivalent that we have in England and Wales.
Yeah, okay. So you've mentioned the home report, so tell us about that.
So the home report was first kind of brought out in 2008 in Scotland, and I personally think it's a real asset that we have in the Scottish market. It just gives that clarity and that peace of mind for any potential buyer to kind of essentially see under the bonnet of the property and make sure that they're fully comfortable and make an informed decision before they submit an offer.
Yeah.
The home report, from a lender perspective, works really well because it allows us to then request a copy of the transcripts, to move at pace, request a copy of the transcripts and work from the same valuation that both the broker and the customer will have seen prior to application being submitted, obviously providing that valuation is in date.
Yeah, yeah. And the obvious question for me is, what if the home report isn't available?
So if there's not a copy of the home report, I can think of a couple of scenarios where that would be the case. So your discounted purchases, your concessionary purchases, we would just go for a valuation for mortgage purposes, and we would do that ourselves on the system.
Yeah.
It might be worth highlighting at this stage, Derek, just in terms of where we'll lend in Scotland as well. So obviously we've got mainland Scotland, which we are comfortable to consider lending on, and in the Scottish Isles, which we can consider as well. They're generally acceptable, but we won't go as far north as Shetland, so it's just something to bear in mind for people listening.
Right, okay. So bearing what you've just said about, we're getting these things, and they can be upfront quite early on, so that's fundamentally different. Tell us about Skipton's SLAs or service level agreements that really, I think, count for the Scottish broker.
Yeah, I think service is a really strong point for Skipton. We pride ourselves on our service level agreements, and we win business as a result of this. So any new cases that are submitted to us, we will look at that within 48 hours. We endeavour to kind of have first touch, first underwrite within 48 hours of case being submitted. And we can do that because, as we've touched on the home report, the benefits of the home report being available, being able to request a transcript to speed up that process. And then should you submit a case to us, any additional documentation that's required from the underwriter, we'll work to have that looked at within 24 hours, so nice and speedy. We appreciate that this is the biggest transaction that customers are making, the biggest financial transaction, and brokers and clients want to move at pace, and so we will also mirror that and do our best to work at pace alongside them. Okay,
and for those of you watching, as Isha said, even if our service pushes out, a Scottish case is going to get looked at within that SLA. But what we should also point out is that we've invested quite heavily in tech. And so when you submit a case to us, Isha talks about the benefit of the home report, but we have a lot of technology working in the background that can check on income. So, you might not need pay slips or bank statements. So the plea for me, certainly when I talk to the clubs and networks that I look after, is just go off the shopping list that you get. And actually we've proved this year with Skipton that we can do day one offers as well. So with what Isha's mentioned and a lot of the technology we've got, we should be very seamless, and we'd like to think we'll have your offer out as quickly as possible. Plea for me is obviously send us what's on the shopping list, and I think you're going to get a really good experience. Any top tips for when a broker's processing a case to come to Skipton?
I think top tips are a broker note or a memo on the case can be your best friend, a really good tool to utilise for our underwriters to have sight of. I would also note we touched on SLAs. So I would also say if you are submitting a case to us and you add a note on the DIP, it will be picked up and reviewed within 2 hours. So that case will automatically refer and somebody will have a look at that for you within 2 hours to come back to you with a decision on whether we can take that case further or consider it further. Another top tip, or my other top tip, would be around offers over and purchase price. So in Scotland, we also have this trend of all properties at the moment going for offers over valuation. When submitting that case to us, I'd always say naturally you're going to be putting in the lower of purchase price or home report to get the correct loan to value band in. Once that case is submitted, upload a memo to the case confirming the correct purchase price. And I would just call out how much offers over the customer is going and where those additional funds are coming from, so the underwriter can have sight of that from the start and we can issue a correct offer.
Okay, thanks Isha we've talked about process and how we can work really quickly. A big strategy moving on then, a big strategy for Skipton is getting more people into homes, and particularly around first time buyers. What are you seeing in Scotland with regards to that?
So I'd say there's a couple of points then that we're seeing in regards to first time buyers in the Scottish market. I think firstly it's just key to call out how innovative we've been as a lender, and that's really resonating with Scotland. So there's two things that I say I'm seeing quite a lot of. The first would be our income booster proposition. So this works really well. It allows up to 4 people on an application. We'll take 100% of all 4 income streams. And it works because we don't need there to be a blood relation between the joint borrower and the sole proprietor. We can have friends going on for friends, we can have employers going on for employees, and that's quite a niche part of our lending policy. So that's a big one for us. And then the second point is track record. And it's done so well since it was first launched. And because of broker feedback, we've actually taken that away and made some enhancements to the proposition fairly recently. Yeah.
Okay, so you've mentioned track record, you've mentioned the enhancements. So can you talk to me a little bit about how track record has helped, particularly in Scotland?
Yes, in my opinion, I think it's landed really well in Scotland. The first case was in Scotland. And as I mentioned, we've made some enhancements to the track record proposition, which just allows more people to take advantage of this going forwards. So I will touch on those changes, Derek, just to kind of highlight that for people listening today. We extended the term, so we've gone for a 40-year term now for track record business. We will consider any property type under track record lending, so we've opened the scope to also look at new build flats, which we didn't previously. And I think the biggest change that we've made is around the monthly payment. So the monthly mortgage payment we will consider going up to 120% of the current monthly rental payment. Naturally, this is subject to full criteria being met and underwrite when the case is submitted, but there's a lot of good changes there to support more first-time buyers onto the property ladder.
Perfect. And we know certainly that affordability is a big challenge for first-time buyers as well. So again, for those watching, what we should point out, that if you didn't be aware of it, that the Skipton Group launched our affordability index. We would encourage you, if you get an opportunity, to go onto the Skipton Group website where you'll see a link to the affordability index. What we're certainly trying to do there as part of Skipton Group is challenge and lobby decision makers, because this affordability index will sort of measure whether it's harder or easier for people to get onto the property ladder by tracking whether this index goes up or down. We're using an awful lot of data from ourselves at Skipton Group, from people at Oxford as well. So a little encouragement there. If you want to go onto the Skipton Group website, you'll see the affordability calculator. Isha, we're using it at a national level as a Skipton Group to do that lobbying and that challenging, but it can also be used at a local level, can't it?
Yeah, so I think this is a fantastic tool for brokers and customers to utilise. As you can see on screen, we've got an example here that talks through what this looks like in West Central Scotland. I think it's really good because it helps customers understand their borrowing power and what the future will look like should they continue to rent or if they buy a property now. This example that we have shows that only 12% of people earning between 23 and 42,000 can actually buy in the West Central Scotland area. So if that customer is one of yours, they're one of the few that are actually able to kind of push on and purchase. So it just gives them that little nudge of encouragement to take that leap onto property ladder.
So thank you, Isha, for joining us today and giving us that insight on the Scottish market, and thank you for joining us We always appreciate you taking time out of your busy day job to watch our webinars. We hope it's been of value. We hope it's given you a bit more insight. If you haven't used this before, some confidence that if you do submit a case to us, we understand the Scottish market and we understand how we can be agile and efficient and make sure you get that offer out as quickly as possible. If you enjoyed this webinar, feedback, whether you think there's anything else we should be talking about, subscribe to our YouTube channel, some really good content on there. If you've got anything you particularly want to pick up about all things Scotland, then we've got Isha, the Scottish BDM, who would be delighted to hear from you. So thank you for joining us and we hope we see you next time.